On Stateline this week, saving our suburbs from overdevelopment.
What we've seen is Sydney being turned into a developer's dream, I suppose. In some cases, it's a community's nightmare.
And euthanasia, how organised is mercy killing?
Well, the biggest theme is that there is what I call the euthanasia underground.
Welcome to Stateline, I'm Quentin Dempster. Urban consolidation, crowding the suburbs of Greater Sydney with flats and apartment blocks to accommodate our rapidly growing population is now a state election issue. This week, the Chikarovsky opposition made a tactical political power play with an election promise to abolish SEP 5 and SEP 53, the state planning instruments which allow the central government to override municipal planning codes. They claim SEP 5, meant to provide much-needed multi-housing for the disabled and over 55s, is being systematically abused by greedy developers. SEP 53, which gives the planning minister power to impose housing density targets on councils, is said to be producing overdevelopment, destroying character and amenity, and overloading infrastructure. In a moment, the planning minister, Andrew Ravshorgi, and opposition spokesman John Brogden in a studio debate. First, let's look again at the challenge facing Greater Sydney from Stateline's analysis last year. At June 2000, Sydney's population was recorded at 4.09 million people. Our population is growing at the rate of 53,000 people a year, the highest sustained growth since the 1960s. That's equivalent to a new city the size of Wagga Wagga every 10 to 12 months. 36,000 of these 53,000 newcomers are overseas migrants. We take 40% of Australia's annual intake. 26,000 are homegrown babies. There's some population loss, about 9,000, through intra and interstate migration, but overall it's minor. By 2013, Sydney's population is expected to grow to 5 million. On current trends, it'll be 6 million by 2050. For Sue Holliday, Director General of the Department of Urban Affairs and Planning, there can be no apology. It's about livability. Like most other global cities, Greater Sydney has a massive air quality problem.
Now, this is the Sydney Basin, and as everyone knows, there are air pollution issues that encourage us even more to use our public transport. The air pollution that's generated in the west moves offshore and then comes back and settles down in the Sydney Basin.
Hence, State Environment Planning Policy 53, urban consolidation along public transport corridors.
And unless we plan to reduce that pollution, then it's going to only get worse.
And you assert that by your transport corridor urban consolidation, you're going to improve the pollution problems of Sydney?
We are certainly going to encourage more people to use public transport, to get out of their cars if we can plan our development in conjunction with transport infrastructure. And that's what we're trying to achieve.
With me now are the Minister for Planning, Acting Premier Dr Andrew Ravshorgi, and Opposition Planning Spokesman John Brogden. Welcome, gentlemen. John Brogden, you're starting the power play with your plan to scrap SEP 5 and SEP 53. Why, given the ageing of our people and the population pressure and air quality problems of Greater Sydney?
If SEP 5 and SEP 53 actually met their intended purposes, we would happily and actively support them. The reality, Quentin, is in the 7 years of the Carr government, they have used SEP 5 and SEP 53 to change the character of Sydney suburbs. For most people, the biggest investment, if not the only investment they'll make in their life, is in their family home. And when they do so, they expect the character of that street and that neighbourhood to stay pretty much as they bought into. To find out that SEP 5 and SEP 53 can have townhouses and units being built next door to them without their consultation, without their involvement, can add enormous concern to the community. People are angry about SEP 5 and SEP 53. They are poor planning policies, not meeting their objectives. We believe they should be abolished.
Residential zoning means nothing given the urban consolidation policy you've got, Dr.
No, far from it. In fact, we have a balanced approach, a sensitive approach where we use local councils to put their input into how, in fact, we do have homes for our elder people, homes for disabled, home for our growing population. Without the local council's input, we'd have the opposition's old policy, which was granny flats all across the state, one size fits all. We've changed that. We've moved so we work with councils to get a better outcome, which means that their local community can stay in their local community. It's interesting to see, this is a challenge we face. Your intro shows very clearly we have a challenge facing Sydney. Now, the answer to that is try and face up to that challenge. What we get from the opposition is it's too hard to make policies. They won't even make them. They'll get rid of anything that tries to help that challenge. They'll walk away from it.
Well, Andrew, that's not true. Councils are being overridden with SEP 5. SEP 5s cannot be stopped by councils. SEP 5 developments can go into areas no matter what the council development controls are. The single largest group of applications before the Land and Environment Court at the moment are SEP 5s. It's clogging up the court. If you have councils are objecting to SEP 5 all over this state, particularly in areas like Hornsby, Strathfield, Sutherland, Warringah, yet your government allows the policy to continue. It's not true to say that SEP 5s work with the councils. They are at odds with council policies.
Look, when I came into this position, I talked to councils about their concerns. I took on board their concerns. I changed SEP 5. We've also made it very clear that SEP 5, older people's accommodation, isn't appropriate in bushfire-prone areas. So we're making sure very clearly that we work with the council and the community's concerns. In regard to making sure we have our increasing population served, our SEP 53, we're very clearly working with councils. In fact, the only place there is an issue is where councils refuse to work with government. And in fact, with SEP 53, there's only one council that's doing that, and that's Ku-ring-gai. So their policy of get rid of SEP 55 is targeted to one council area, one seat, Ku-ring-gai, their deputy leader's position.
That's simply not true. SEP 53 was a big stick approach. If councils did not agree with SEP 53, which requires townhouses and high-rises in suburban residential areas across Sydney, you would have taken away their planning powers. Just as you have taken away the planning powers in Ku-ring-gai a couple of weeks ago, you now have taken away from Ku-ring-gai Council, for instance, the planning on 5 sites. And that's taken away from the community, taken away from the council.
No, it hasn't.
When you say people have to cooperate with the government, it's at risk of losing planning powers. It's a big stick approach.
All other councils have worked with us to do that.
All lose
your
their planning
policy,
powers.
Your policy.
There is a bit of coercion. Of
course there is. There's no doubt
you
there
write
is.
to them and say, if you don't, I'm going to have to impose.
But it allows flexibility with them. Their previous policy, the Liberals' previous policy, was granny flats across the state. One size
Filling
fits
in
all.
the backyard.
Everything, that's what they were saying.
Well,
we changed that. We got rid of that when we came in, and we said we'll work with councils. We've all got this challenge. You can walk away from the challenge. That's irresponsible. The opposition says after 7 years, we'll walk away from the challenge. We'll have no policy going into the next election. We'll in fact think about a policy later on.
All right, well,
the reality is this challenge, homes for our older people, homes for our kids, homes for a growing population, you've got to face up to it. It's difficult. We don't always get it perfect, but at least we've got to have a really good go.
Let's ask Mr Brogden. OK, you're scrapping SEP 5 and SEP 53. You might win a few votes because there is outrage there about overdevelopment in some suburbs of Sydney, but what do you replace it with? A talk fest?
No, the real approach to planning is to have a balance in planning between consolidation where it's appropriate in suburban areas and land release. This government has strangled land release over recent years. Land release has dropped to about 5,000 to 7,000 lots of land being released in Sydney and the Central Coast.
So you sprawl, that's your policy, sprawl.
You don't sprawl. What you do is have a policy that links transport infrastructure with land release. This government doesn't have a policy. Last year, Andrew announced 89,000 new lots of land to be released in Sydney over the next 15 years without a transport policy. So he said, release the land, the transport policy will come on later. And the price of land, this is very important in terms of this government's inability to provide affordable housing in Sydney. The price of land in Sydney, when they came to government 7 years ago, was $84,000 a lot, average price. Today, it's nearly $180,000. So in 7 years, the price of land has more than doubled. So if you want to make room for people to live and for kids to buy houses, how can they do that when the price of land has more than doubled?
Let's come back a few on that. Who was it that released Rouse Hill without any transport? That was the Liberals. That's why we've had to spend more than $300 million upgrading the Windsor Road. That's their policy. What have we done with a land release? We said no land release without the infrastructure, including public transport, to go with it. John Brogden...
That's why you haven't released any...
No, we have. We've been releasing. We, in fact, have
but not
right
much,
now...
Not much, given the population pressure on Greater
We've got
Sydney.
150,000 lots that we've said are available over the next 15 years.
Without a transport plan?
No, with a transport.
Where's the transport plan?
That's being developed. Those areas that need it will be released when the transport's there. We've said it must be linked up together, not what they did.
So there's no plan yet.
The Windsor Road is a classic of what the Liberals did. we're saying no more Windsor roads. We will have the public transport, the infrastructure, as those suburbs develop. It has to be the way, and that was the big decision we made. That's why it was a joint cabinet minute with myself and the Minister for Transport, Carl Scully, that put that through cabinet and insisted we have that. No more liberal planning, no more Windsor roads where the people are stranded and can't get to work or get home. We have to have a much more integrated approach. That's the way we want to do it. None of these are, of course, easy challenges, but you've got to have a go. And what the opposition's saying, after 7 years in opposition, we have no policy. We have none at all.
And after 7 years in
fact,
government, you have no plan.
Andrew F. Shorgie, John Brogden, thanks very much.
Thank you.
To Dissent, our look at what the stirrers are up to. Jeff Sims reports.
Garbage, garbage, garbage. If there's one reliable indicator of suburban affluence, it's not the disposable income so much as what ends up disposed of. And before the state government at the moment is a proposal to send waste from all over Sydney's affluent northern suburbs to Auburn in Sydney's west.
Auburn Council already has 5 other waste facilities in the LGA. It seems absurd to be putting more rubbish into this area when we're already shouldering the burden of Sydney's waste at this point.
The proposed site for the new waste transfer station is the old Clyde marshalling yards off Parramatta Road. You might think not an unreasonable location. It's already an industrial site away from residential areas. But the stuff would have to get there, and that would mean a never-ending convoy of waste from those nice northern suburbs, offloaded, compacted, with all the noise and pong you'd expect, before being dispatched by rail to the Southern Highlands. It might be some of the finest upmarket garbage to be had, but Auburn Council thinks the proposal is on the nose. In Sydney's inner west, in Glebe, there's also a never-say-die battle going on. Glebe is part of Leichhardt Council, but it's supposed to be absorbed or gobbled up by Sydney City Council, and some of the Glebites are none too pleased. The deal is supposedly all done and not negotiable under the Boundaries Commission's plans. But some people don't give up easily. They've formed a group with an acronym which means rabies in French. Maybe they don't know it, maybe they do. Whatever, they're frothing at the mouth at the way changes have been made.
The Boundaries Commission has declined to take any public submissions, but it has engaged interstate consultants to try and find out what to do after it recommends the boundaries change. This is, of course, completely contrary to what the Act says, and we're going to try and make sure the people of Glebe understand what is going on.
The Ragers promise a serious political campaign to unseat the Carr government's local member, Sandra Norrie, if they don't get their way.
An investigative lawyer